The Skillman Library has plans to close. Now, there's some people who are pretty upset about it. I don't want to go on some tirade about how all public libraries are a waste of tax money and should be closed, but I kind of leaning that way. But for library supporters, is there ever a good time or a good excuse to shut down any library ever? Like, what if you spent all this money to service people, but you're only servicing like 1/10 as many people as you thought you would? I mean, is there what is the metric by which you would say, yes, that library is obsolete and we need to shut it down, or it is a waste, it's inefficient, and we can do the job with our 29 other libraries? There's 30 libraries in the Dallas library system. Is there any way they would ever admit the public library system is anachronistic? Because I think libraries are pretty obsolete, especially public libraries are definitely obsolete. And there's a lot of things that you don't realize you don't like about public libraries. You think it's just, hey, it's a nice place for people to go get books at a reasonable cost, and it doesn't cost much anyway. And it's a library. It's for learning. It's a good thing. We want people to be smart, don't we? Well, where would the drag queens do their story hour to kids if not in public libraries? You know, you've seen like drag queen brunches and stuff. It's kind of hard to complain about that. That's just adults with other adults doing adult things, and they're not letting kids in there. But the nasty stuff happens in schools and public libraries. If you do need a library at public expense, well, we've got school kids. They've got to study. They've got to learn. You've got a library in your school. Why do you need this extra one? This isn't for the kids. The library is also used for a place for political activist groups to meet. Almost all of these political activist groups disagree with you. I only know this part because for a while there, now this was like 20 years ago, when I lived at like Windhaven in the Tollway, there's a library that was across the street from my apartment. It's still there, Windhaven Courts or Estates or something. So I went there, and I was amazed at how many times the meeting room had some political activist group. They never agreed with me, not once. It was just a setup for a big government program to support big government activists so they can go out and they can agitate for more big government. It was almost like they were giving their minions, their foot soldiers, facilities at your expense. Where will homeless people access porn and take sink showers, if not the public libraries? That's what happens at the Dallas Public Library downtown. Don't go. If you go in the bathroom and it smells, just turn around and walk out, because that means there's a dude that basically lives in there. But I love this idea also, the pro-library people that, man, the poor people, James, they need access to books. How do you expect them to improve their lot in life if they don't have access to books? They're not reading books, dude. They wouldn't be poor anymore. And if they were, it'd be a temporary situation. And if they do need books, we have private sector book accommodations. We have bookstores, we have book charities, and then there's this something that just a little piece of wisdom from some hick who just crawled out of a log cabin in the middle of the forest. There are such things as private libraries that aren't from taxpayer expense. How do I know? We have them out in the country all over the place, because I saw the petition that was getting floated around to save the Skillman Library. I think it's obsolete. That's my main argument against them. Isn't necessarily that it's socialist. It's a joke. We have the internet, we have computers, we have smartphones. I mean, the libraries are not just obsolete. They're so obsolete, they're a laughing stock. First, if you don't give me the educational angle. All of your kids' schools have libraries in them. These extra libraries that are floating around, come on, man. What's the point of this? We don't have a shortage of a book availabilities. I mean, we have giant book chains that are going out of business. There's too many books on the market. Books are cheap. Books are readily available. If you're a guy who wants to read a book and you can't get your hand on a book, it doesn't take much effort to find one. Go to a garage sale. My church, First Baptist Church of Bug Tussle, we had a fundraiser over the summer for the kids' summer camps. People donated hundreds of books. And you know what we only sold like a dozen of? Yeah, that's right. Books. But look, I was late to the smartphone game, but when I got one, there was a library app. I'm like, oh yeah, you can just download books. That's crazy. And I found out like most of the classic works of literature are free. Some institution just pays for the bandwidth, I guess. But I downloaded like that first week. I first had my first smartphone. I downloaded dozens of classic works. It was everything. Catcher in the Rye, Plato's Republic, Common Sense from Thomas Paine. That's where I read that. And I'm not saying there's zero demand for libraries, not at all. I'm just saying it's not big enough that we need to subsidize it with your money. Books are like any other industry. The demand for books is going to be met more quickly, with better quality and less expense, more efficiently, with private sector rather than the public sector. And look at your bookstores versus this Skillman library or the nearest Books A Million to you. Which one has better hours of operations? Which one's open longer? Which one has more helpful staff? Which one actually services more people? Which one has more people in it right now? But I want to also bring you some of the wisdom of us common old booger eaters out in bug tussle. Out there where you don't wear shoes every day and you wear overalls without a shirt and it's not your fault. God made your cousin so pretty. We see things that you don't see if you're stuck in DFW. Because in small town rural America, they have this whole thing. You're not going to believe this. This is going to sound like fantasy. This is going to sound like a flying unicorn. They have privatized libraries. Oh my goodness. You mean we can have a library and without public spending? Yeah. But it's actually fairly common out in the country because tiny towns don't have a tax base to have just extra money to throw at a library. And depending on what small town you're in, the nearest bookstore could be, like an hour round trip away, if not further. So what do these communities do? They come together and they use their own private voluntary donations. I know, it's amazing. Imagine that. They have fundraisers, they have book sales, they have chili cook-offs. Some of them are completely run by volunteers. But for the Skillman library folks, or for any of you public library folks, if these libraries are so important to the community, then why don't you just take over the library and run it privately? Now, you want this library to stay open. How many volunteer hours are you willing to work? How much money are you willing to donate? How much money are you willing to raise on behalf of the library? Because if y'all were everyone signing this petition was able to do some work, you wouldn't need my taxpayer money to keep it open. You could actually keep it open your damn self without forcing me and you to pay for it. Why don't you go organize some fundraisers? Why don't you buy that building and prove me wrong? This is your chance. It's like the people who say, well, fast food workers should be making $25 an hour. Go open a McDonald's franchise, pay your people $25 an hour. Prove me wrong. Show me how it's done, smarty pants. Economic genius. If I'm so wrong, then this is a great chance to make me look like just a hateful little idiot. But I'm not. I'm not saying this out of a place of hate. I'm not saying this because I'm just some mean guy who wants to slap the books out of the hands of poor children. I'm saying this because it's an absolute waste. It's a farce. I can't pretend it's not a farce, and it's wasting my money, and it's wasting your money. And it's even wasting the money of the people that are standing up for it. Do you know how cheap books are today? Go to an estate sale. Go to a garage. Dude, they're so cheap. I got books I will just give. If you want to get started, I'll give you enough books to last you the rest of the year. But this library activism often comes with an appeal to the poor, like our poor downtrodden neighbors. They would be getting ahead if only they had more access to books at your expense. No, not if they had more access to private sector bookstores or private libraries or charitably donated book programs or any other option. You have to pay for it. It has to be at your expense. BS. I would like to note that I'm never forcing anyone else to fund my ideas involuntarily like this. Anytime they say poor people need food, what they really mean is the taxpayers need to pay for their food. Or if someone has, we need poor people need help getting houses. They just want to force you to pay through taxes. I'm never doing that to them. You're never doing that to them. How come they're always trying to force me to pay for something, but I'm never trying to force them to pay for what I want to do? When I say we need more guns in the community, I don't say there should be a government program where we all go buy up a bunch of guns and start handing them out in the bad neighborhoods, or set up 30 locations where people can just come check out a gun. So why do we have to keep spending millions and millions and millions of your tax dollars on this stuff? I remember that earlier this year, we had to vote to get $1.2 billion worth of bonds. We had to run up Dallas's credit card because we were so out of money. We weren't going to have caps. We weren't going to have firefighters or roads or bridges if we didn't get $1.2 billion in new debt. Oh, but we can afford 30 library locations. This is Steve in Carrollton. You're next up on WBAP. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I'm both ways on your point, because initially I was like, you know what? He's crazy. We do need libraries because we need libraries, but generally speaking, that's a terrible way to approach an argument. But I looked and thought, it just so happens that I recently spent some time at our public library, one of our public libraries in Carrollton, and I found there to be a lot of strange fellows working the library and patrons at the library. It seemed that there were a lot of men walking around, didn't have any kids attached to them. They were just there. They're like, what are you doing? Are you looking for books? Why do you all look weird? It seems a place for vagrants to hang out. A lot of the homeless hang out at the library, or people who, I saw one guy who dropped off this lady who was obviously mentally deficient, and she sat there the entire day, just sitting there, almost as if it's a free babysitter. I mean, it wasn't the greatest. But now on the other side of that, though, I'll say that in that same library, to your argument about it being a socialist place, there was not one single Bible. Not King James. There wasn't a Quran. There was a Quran. I take that back. But there was not a Talmud. There was not a Torah.
Did you actively look for a Bible?
I actively looked for a Bible because I was listening to a podcast, and I said, you know what? While I'm here, let me see if they just happen to have a Bible. And I'll be daggum. They had one in the category, in the log, in the online thing that says, yes, you can check it out. But I went to the shelf. I took two separate librarians. Neither of them were able to find it. She ultimately came back and said, yeah, it looks like that's lost. I was like, well, that makes sense in a socialist type place.
God, Steve, that makes me look.
The good stuff.
Now, you just pissed me off. Burn them all down. Just burn them all. No, that's all right. I needed to know that. I needed to know the bad information. Look, I even tried to have the woman who started the petition to come on the show to make her case, and I stalled for 2 segments, and we called her like 6 times trying to get her on. So I don't know if she's dodging me or whatnot. But you can't find the single most important book in Western civilization, the most important book in the history of the world, the best-selling book every year since the Gutenberg press was invented, and that's not in your library. Then what's it for? Drag Queen Story Hour? The gay BCs? Forget all this.
It really is. And I looked up that too, speaking of that.
Oh, they had the gay BCs?
No, not
okay.
The second most popular book, which was something from the guy in China. Oh, my goodness.
Mao Zedong, the little red book?
Tongue, yes.
Yeah.
Tongue was the number 2 search book, but the Bible was the obvious front runner by 5 or 6 times the number. I mean, it was completely insane. And the librarian I was talking to, acted like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can see you looking for a book. I know you may think it's number 1. I was like, no, lady, it's the number 1 book, and you guys don't have several copies.
Thanks for making me mad, Steve. I needed to hear that. Thank you, sir.
Man.
Bob in Cleveland, you're next up on WBAP. What do you think, sir?
James, now that I just heard about the Bible not being in that library, how do we protect vintage works of art?
Put them in a museum?
Okay.
You want to keep the library system around as a storage system for vintage art?
Well, books. About a year or two ago, they were talking about they're changing the way the books were written. And because of the woke people don't like the word fat. So we got to pull the word fat out of all the books. It was
How 1984 is... Listen, the main character in 1984, I know you probably read it, but for people who haven't, his name's Winston Smith. His job is to literally go back and take old newspaper articles and old books and edit them and then resubmit them to change history. Like, that's literally the main character's job in 1984. This is what they want to do now. Hey, Orwell is not an instruction manual. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're not supposed to say, that sounds like a good idea. And so I swear, like, some people, like me and you probably had to read it when we were juniors in high school. Some people read that and they're like, ooh, I'll try that. As soon as I get in a position of power, let's start changing the meaning of words. That'll be cool. Let's do that. And then we'll change old photos and we'll change like the record of history to take the bad stuff out and leave the good stuff in.
Exactly.
So what do you think? Burn them all down?
That's what No. Well, I don't know what to do, really. How do we protect those works of art?
Well, the first thing I would say
Google's
is
already doing it.
Privatize them.
Changing the headlines.
Privatize it.
I agree with that.
That's it. If it's worth something, then the city of Dallas that owns it right now needs to sell it, and that money needs to go into the taxpayer coffers. We need to get a little bit of a break from that. That's what you do with it. If it really is worth something, someone will save it and put it up somewhere. And if these things are really so amazing, then let's just start a new museum. We'll go get all these old works of arts, and we'll close down the libraries and open art museums. Daniel in Dallas, you're next up on WBAP. What do you think, Daniel?
I find this kind of similar to private and public roads. I mean, how do you feel about private roads?
Good.
You like private roads?
That's kind of a vague question, but yeah, private roads, great.
I mean, but the money I spend on the Dallas tollway is to China or Spain or whoever owns the road.
Okay, I don't like that.
Right, and I mean, same thing goes. I don't drive on I-30, but yet my tax dollars pay for it, so it's kind of a conundrum.
I still don't understand.
Public library.
Are you arguing for them or against them?
I'm a little bit of both. I'm kind of on the fence, honestly.
All right. Well, when you said private roads, I thought of the road that I grew up on. I grew up on a private road. It was out in the middle of course, nowhere. Like when I say I'm from Bug Tussle, I'm really just from like a 30-acre hay pasture. I'm not from anywhere. It's just floating out in East Texas. And in order to get from the county road into this well that they were drilling, this oil company cleared a road and then they blacktopped it. And then we built houses off of that, or my parents bought some land off of that and built a house. So I grew up on a private road. So I wasn't thinking tollways. Like you were saying in private roads. So that kind of threw me off. As far as like tollways go, there's still like a public-private partnership. I don't agree with anyone outside the United States owning them. Like I don't agree with any outside government owning like land in Texas. I have a hard time with them owning a building, even leasing a building, really. Private citizens, sure, but we don't want to get off in the China buying farmland topic. But yeah, generally speaking, there's a lot more private roads out there than people realize. I don't know if you notice when you go into some subdivisions, the roads are wonky and the curbs are weird, and this isn't normal. It's probably a private road. So no, I'm generally speaking, I'm for privatizing everything that's not explicitly written into the Constitution. And if you want to, fudge with me a little bit, then let's do it at the lowest government level possible. Not a federal program, probably not even a state program, county at the top.
I mean, when everything's privatized, though, there's an opportunity for companies to get together, the handful of companies that own everything in the grocery store, to get together and raise the prices on everything.
When does that happen?
When does that happen?
Yeah. Give me an example.
I mean, it happens with everything. Gas. I mean, the gas companies, they dictate the rate.
Yeah, but they didn't like double the prices overnight. They didn't form a cartel. They tried to do that in the 70s. That's a bit of a mess. But no, this whole idea that if you have everything privatized, then the free market is going to come up with some sort of cartel and monopolize it and then exploit the end user. I mean, that's an interesting theory. It just doesn't happen. I
mean, essentially 10 companies own everything that's sold at the grocery store.
Right.
So.
Thank goodness it's not a monopoly, or they could do what you were surmising. But yeah, these 10 companies make sure everyone else doesn't jack up the prices, because if they do jack up the prices on Cheerios, then Kellogg's is going to sell you Frosted Flakes for half the price.
Well, or Kellogg's is going to raise the price on their own, thinking, hey, I can get what they can get. And that's how the price continues to go up.
Okay, so why aren't they doing that now?
The price is going up.
Well, yeah, it went up 30% over 5 years. You're talking about like a cereal costing $20 a box. If they could just raise it to whatever they want. So you're saying they still have a limit to how much they can raise it without losing market share? Private sector's doing good. But look, this is the great argument or discussion that we need to have, around price controls and the air quotes price gouging conversation. Some of you on Team Red, you need to be a little more stoic and a little more sure of yourself when it comes to the free market. This is the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.